Hi guys, Yuki here, back with Seduce Me Too. We left off with Damien. I'm not exactly sure what I should do because I don't know. What would he want? I mean, I know he hasn't fed in a really long time, but there's also the fact that he doesn't want to be a demon. So this is going to be like a pretty challenging thing to think about. And I think we don't want him to accidentally go overboard, but also we know that he's really hungry, well, for energy and all that stuff. So there's that too. But you know what? Take as much as you want. I feel like this might end badly, but I've made my choice. I was more than willing to dive into the chance if he begged it of me. He was mine and I was his, even beyond what we were physically. The shape of his lips, his hands, his body against mine always lit my body on fire with his touches. Soon enough, my words consumed his thoughts, and he captured my lips with his own in a desperately passionate kiss, making me gasp in surprise. He released my hands, allowing me to wrap my arms around his neck as he pressed himself harder against my body, pinning me to the wall with his chest and hips. His own hands traveled to my hips and lifted me up further on the wall, fingers dancing over the skin beneath my shirt. As shudders ran through my body, the enthrallment he set in my core began to consume me, filling me with the heated need for him. Damien became the only thing I was able to think about, the only person I let my thoughts, the only demon I let take all of my body, mind, and soul. Damien slowly began to drag his kisses down my cheek and onto my neck, rolling the clothes covering my chest up over my skin and making me lift my arms off of Damien's shoulders. He pulled away once just to pull the articles of clothing off of me, leaving me completely nude above the waist. The cool air that rushed against my skin made me quake a bit in Damien's arms, but only spurred him to lick and nip over my skin. A hot moan ran through my lips at the heat of the feeling. There was indeed a starving demon enjoying a feast of energy, growling happily at the sound of my moans and tightening his grip at the feeling of my shivering body. Something like this was addicting and wildly erotic, something I didn't ever get to experience before. I slightly feared becoming needy for it, but I let the thought dissipate with his hands caressing my skin hotly.
I need you so much.
Okay. I'm just gonna continue. Me too, Damien. His voice raked amorous shivers down my spine, making me roll my eyes to the back of my head and press my head to the wall behind me. I barely felt him removing the remainder of our clothes, leaving us bare against each other. Truthfully, I couldn't have cared less where we made love, against the wall, on the floor, on the bed, it doesn't matter to me. I just needed him. Blame the enthrallment or blame my own selfish perversion, it mattered little to me the difference between. The night became filled with heavy pants and moans whenever we made love. It was deep, slow, and romantic with me and Damien. However, tonight was rough, beast-like and almost carnal. The new feelings within me drove me mad with each moan I released and each gasp for air I took in. This was new and I loved it. As he rocked through our simultaneous climax, the draining of my energy sent my mind into a misty frenzy, taking over my body and completely wrapping myself around Damien as he held me closer still. The sound of his hot breath in my ear sent shivers down my body even as we slowly coasted towards a brilliantly deserved afterglow. His arms around me cradled me against his warm chest as we inhaled and exhaled in perfect sync. That was...
Yeah.
Well, okay, this is really awkward. I looked up at Damien, seeing him stare up into the ceiling. His eyes had returned to normal, but his expression was slightly enigmatic. What was on his mind? Feeling my gaze on him, Damien looked down and smiled, kissing over my forehead.
I hope I didn't hurt you.
I shook my head and cuddled closer to Damien, nuzzling his chest lovingly. It was amazing. Damien nodded before holding me close and falling into a well-deserved sleep, with me following quickly after. The morning slowly rose with me, waking me up to see Damien's sleeping face. As I slowly sat up, I felt the ache of the morning wreck through me, demanding that I go back to sleep. However, I knew better. I knew that the day had to continue forward and that I had to wake up. Still, seeing Damien fast asleep made me feel a bit relieved. He certainly needed the sleep after the night before. A very faint knock rapped at the door, causing me to look up and see Diana enter with 2 plates of warm food. As she stepped in, she looked at me and tilted her head.
Up again before him?
I nodded and rubbed the back of my head, grinning a bit. I guess I've gotten used to the demon world time. Diana laughed a bit before placing the food she held on the table nearby and crossed her arms.
I see. Well, if you could, please wake Damien up. I have something I must speak to you two about.
Huh? What is it? Diana grimaced and looked away from me, staring at the ground and avoiding my gaze.
It would be best if both of you heard my news. Please, just wake him up.
Oh gosh. I nodded and looked to Damien, seeing him slightly stir against my body before I placed my hands on his shoulders and kissed his cheek. Damien, wake up. Kiss his cheek again. I giggled a bit and kissed his cheek again, nuzzling his temple with my nose. Come on, Diana's here and wants to talk to us. Damien stirred a bit more, firmly opening his eyes and yawning from being awoken. As he looked up at me, I smiled down at him, earning a tired smile back. Morning.
Morning.
I don't think he's ever gonna put on a shirt. Damien slowly sat up, stretching his arms over his head before shaking his head and looking to Diana, taking in that she was in the room.
Good morning.
Damien only nodded before leaning back against the bedpost, relaxing against them as he looked to me. I turned my head to Diana and gestured her to speak. So, what is it? Diana looked at the floor, trying to find the answers in the wooden grain. I became more curious as to what Diana was about to reveal the longer the silence in the air lingered. What was the important news she had to say? When Diana formulated her answer, she looked up at me and Damien, taking in a breath.
I may have found a way to perform a reverse ritual.
Oh. A what? Diana ran her hand through her hair and locked her gaze to me, obviously more comfortable with speaking to me than to my fiancé.
Long ago, when this world was forged, there was a human named Lilith, who was transformed into a demon and was brought to this world. It had been known ever since that any human who wished to be a demon, or is punished to be one, can very much become one.
Okay, so what are you trying to say? Diana nodded slowly, bringing her hands to her stomach and fiddling over her fingers.
It took me some sleepless nights, but I do believe I can perform a reverse ritual, which would in essence turn a demon into a human.
My heart stopped. It was possible now?
How are you sure?
I could hear the twinge of sour strain in Damien's voice. He was right to be skeptical. After all, she had failed to turn him human before. What was to say that this wasn't going to be a failure as well? Diana shook her head and lowered her hands to her sides.
I'm not. Nothing like this has ever been done before, and it could be risky. Hell, you could even die from this.
I don't want him to die. What? I instantly stood up from the bed, making Diana turn her gaze at me in shock. This could kill Damien? There was no way in hell I was going to go through with this if she was suggesting such a thing. And why are you suggesting it? What are you suggesting, Buh?
I'm suggesting that it's an option. A risky one, but an option nonetheless.
Diana turned her eyes to Damien, seeing him straighten up in bed and gaze back at her with a serious expression.
I know that what I did back then was wrong. My intent was to make you as human as possible, but there was no method to even do that until now. If this works, you will become human. I swear on my family name.
I can't just stay silent. I have to. I'm going aggressive here. Interject. It may have been Diana's form of redemption, but it was potentially risking Damien's life. Who knew if this would work at all, let alone successfully turn him human without killing him? Diana, this is insane.
But it's the only option there is.
Diana looked to me and stared into my soul, making me almost freeze up in place from the intensity of her stare.
I lost my family despite having the energy to drive the Demon Lord away from them. I've received my due punishment for this mistake, and now I'm going to make it right. It is up to him if he wishes to become a human or not.
I looked over at Damien and watched him look back over to me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. I could tell what he wanted, but would he ask me anything? Would I have a say?
Why wouldn't you have a say?
Oh my god! Diana! Evil Diana, leave me alone! Before my eyes rolled around me frozen, I was shut in a room of darkness, everything barely tinted in shadow. What? I looked around, feeling stuck in my spot, as dark laughter echoed around the room.
It would be so selfish of him to become human without considering your feelings first. Wouldn't you agree?
What do you want now?
I'm just stating what's deep in your heart. Nothing more.
What do you mean?
Don't tell me I have to spell it out, dear. Damien turning human? He'd lose all of his powers. He'd be worthless, weak, and simple.
But what if it's what he wants?
Do you even know what he wants?
The memory of my wedding day flashed before my eyes. The voice was telling me the truth. Did I really know what Damien wanted? Was anything he wanted for the best? The voice chuckled deeply, a relaxation settling into my core.
Now you're getting it.
I'm not gonna allow you to bully me. I remained silent, now lost once again. What was best? What if turning Damien human meant destroying who he was? I became trapped in an endless cycle of questions and confusion as the voice finally vanished and let the world continue on its journey forward in time.
You do not have to decide now, but I will be awaiting your answer if you do wish to try.
Thank you.
Diana nodded before leaving the room, most likely to prepare for the day. Damien and I stood in silence, me lost from the voice in my head, and Damien lost in his own thoughts. What were we supposed to do? The option was now on the table, but instead of Diana sleeping with Damien, there was a chance that Damien could lose his life. I wasn't sure where I stood on the issue, but I didn't like the options I was given before and now. Was it better to just leave Damien a demon? Was it worth dying to become a human? The voice in my head teased me, prodded me to convince Damien to think against himself, but my heart knew the choice was his alone. As I looked to him, I could see the conflict in his eyes while he stood and took up both the breakfast plates Diana made for us. He walked to me at last and handed me one, looking into my eyes and locking our gazes on each other. Was he going to ask me? Was he going to keep the choice to himself?
Selfish.
Leave me alone! I mentally flinched at the word, hearing it ring in my heart. However, as Damien turned and sat down at the edge of the bed, I watched as he let out a sigh before starting to eat. I guess the choice was willing to be his own, whether I liked it or not. We ate in silence until he left for his training and I headed for my own. Never had I felt such strain and worry pull at my heart until that moment. I needed it to work out. As I arrived at the hall for training, I was surprised to see Seiro in the room instead of Diana. Seiro? Seiro turned to me and nodded his head.
You will be training with me today. I apologize for my lady's absence.
What do you mean? Where's Diana?
Unfortunately, I am not allowed to say. All I can say is that she is seeing to herself for the day.
When she is saying to herself, that means she's battling her inner demon. I pressed my lips together into a fine line. It wasn't a good excuse, but if I didn't have a choice in the matter, then there was no use fighting it. I pulled my circlet off of my wrist and chucked it in front of me, forming the floating ring barrier around my body. Alright, then don't hold back. Seiro nodded and prepped his stance, aiming a spear in my direction. I had to use this new training partner as a new experience. Not everyone would fight like Diana, so this was a good challenge for me. Fighting with Seiro was no easy task. He was fast and thought 10 steps ahead of me, catching me off guard at some points. Still, I could tell that I was putting up a good fight with my defense. What surprised me was how time passed without even noticing it. The more I clashed with Sarah, the more ignorant I became of the sky's eventual descent from light purple to dark orange. Soon enough, our training had ended. I panted out of breath, but surprisingly still on my feet. I didn't understand how or why, but I could only assume that I was getting better, which was a good thing. Sarah smirked as he caught his breath as well, stretching with his spear behind his shoulder blades.
My lady trained you very well. I believe you'll be able to handle yourself in the siege to come.
I grinned, happy to hear that I had impressed Diana's top guard with my skills. I only trained for a couple days, but showed great improvement. Maybe the demon world was aiding me in becoming a stronger person. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah nodded before walking to the exit of the room.
Now, please excuse me. I must see to the incubi. You are free to come with me if you'd like.
I shook my head. My bedroom was calling for me to return, and I deserved a night of rest. Besides, it would only have been a distraction for the boys. I began to walk towards my room, exhausted and tired. However, as I passed the library, I stopped walking at a voice that slowly crept from the crack of the door.
This game is getting tiresome, Miss Ayer.
I quickly peeked in and suddenly gasped to see the copycat gripping Diana's neck and tilting her body back while Diana was on her knees, her head dropping back to let her face look up to the ceiling. Diana, however, seemed to be unconscious but breathing, so the copycat wasn't choking her. Before I could rush in, however, Diana lifted her hand and took hold of one of the copycat's wrists.
It's useless to fight me. I was born to take over and become the new you. I will not let you.
Just from the sound of Diana's voice, she seemed to be as calm as ice despite a pair of hands clasped around her neck. Diana opened her eyes and looked to the ceiling, uncaring and still.
My will is stronger than your so-called power. It doesn't matter. I'll take over soon enough. That pathetic guilt you have in your body will bleed you dry.
I glared. Enough was enough. Barging in, I removed my circlet and prepared to throw it. But before I could, however, the copycat looked at me and grinned.
Oh, look! Harold Anderson's granddaughter is here.
I froze in place. Oh yeah, I don't know that she was the one who caused the death of my grandfather. Ooh, I just realized that. How did she know my grandfather? As I stared at the copycat, Diana turned her head and stared wide out at me.
Harold Anderson's granddaughter?
I switched my gaze to look at Diana, seeing her complete ice stare turn into a look of despair and fear. What was going on? Why bring up my grandfather? Did she know him? The copycat licked her lips and released Diana, walking towards me as I tried to take in the situation.
It must have been so heartbreaking when you found out he passed away.
What do you know about my grandfather?
Stop it! Oh, nothing much. I only saw him once, when I went to the human world.
Before she could continue, however, Diana pounced off of the floor and attempted to tackle the copycat, only to fall through a vanishing after image. The copycat reappeared on the other side of me, grabbing the hand I held my circlet in and danced her fingers over the steel of my weapon.
It's such a shame that he had to die. He could have been powerful enough to take control of the entire demon world with a wave of his hand.
My mind went in a small frenzy. I knew that my grandfather used magic, but he was that powerful? How could he have died then? I looked to the copycat, feeling my endless desire for answers to take over. How do you know my grandfather? Copycat smirked and opened her mouth to speak, but froze as Diana shouted, stopping her and causing me to gasp.
Because I killed him!
No. That couldn't be. My heart began to shake and crumble within my chest as my mind became flooded with memories of his funeral. There was no official record of how he died, only that he had passed away. This was the reason why? I slowly turned my head to Diana, seeing her on her hands and knees, gripping the ground in anger and guilt. She kept her head down as she continued speaking.
When the boys left the demon world, I had to track them down and find out who took them away. In a blind and misguided need, I recast the spell they used to open the bridge between our worlds, and used the remainder of that man's life to come through. I can't ever ask for your forgiveness. I took his life, and I've been punished greatly for that choice. But I swear, on the ashes of my family, it was not something I wanted to do.
I could only stare at Diana, barely hearing her over the memory of rain hitting my grandfather's gravestone echoing in my mind. My grandfather was buried 6 feet beneath the ground because of her. The copycat clapped and chuckled beside me, but I didn't care enough to look back at it.
Well done, Izeur. The first step of redemption is always the confession.
One word bounced through my head as I stared at Diana, watching her lower her head further onto the floor with her forehead against the stone. Her body contracted over herself, moving her hair from her back and revealing the intricate demon marks across her skin. When the word became unbearably loud in my thoughts, I let it resonate out of my mouth. Why? Diana kept her head to the floor as the copycat purred happily beside me. I had to place everything in perspective. Diana had saved my life, but sacrificed my grandfather's. Was her saving me meant to be a debt repaid? She didn't know that I was his granddaughter, however. If she had already been punished, then that definitely couldn't have been the case. Then why would she save me if she had already killed a human? Why weren't angels hunting her down? Something wasn't right. I looked to the copycat, seeing her practically drool at the sight of Diana groveling. Are you really Madness? As it took in my question, the copycat looked at me with an offended glare.
Madness? Is that what Izeur told you? Such a bad girl indeed, even without my help.
I looked again to Diana, seeing her body tense up. She lied to me? When the copycat chuckled, I turned back to see that wasn't the case.
Well, I'm not exactly Madness. I'm just a being that was created to enhance your story.
Again with the meta. Now it wasn't making any sense. My story? What the hell was it even talking about? At my confused face, the copycat laughed.
You wouldn't understand, little human. Yes, she would.
The copycat and I turned our heads to see Diana, finally rising from the ground, glaring deeply at her copycat. For a brief second, I could sense the flinch that erupted from the copycat at the sight, but continued to look at Diana.
She may have grown attached to a demon, but that does not make her ignorant. She may be a simple human, but she is more than deserving to know everything the 5 worlds has to hide.
The power balance in the room seemed to shift as Diana took hold of the dominance from the copycat and made her own presence intensify with her words. She tilted her head slightly, letting me and the copycat see both of her eyes filled with pure malice and ill intent. As she glared, a hard rush of fear ran through me, and deep gold covered her eyes, shaking the air in the room with her gaze alone.
However, I'll tell her everything after I finally rip out your throat!
With the blink of an eye, Diana vanished and slammed into the copycat, jamming her elbow into the chest and sending it back. The copycat flew across the room and bounced off of bookshelves, causing some of the books to fall over as it dropped to its knees. Diana settled onto her feet and walked towards it, forming her saber in her hand.
I should have killed you the moment you began to fester. That golden heart of yours always seems to get in the way, huh?
Diana suddenly rushed at the fallen being, arcing her saber to slash through it, but only swiped at an after image. The copycat reappeared behind Diana and kicked both of her knees out from under her, causing her to fall to the floor. I felt my instinct jumped, but was it my fight to join in? Everything about this situation was blurred and confusing. Who was right? Who was wrong? Which Diana was to blame? My heart knew that the real Diana was innocent. The copycat must have forced her to do horrible things she did somehow. The horrible things she did somehow. The question still remained, however. Would I help or watch? Well, help, obviously. Help Diana. Even though it's her demons to fight, it seems she needs a little bit more help. And although I'm not really the one who should be helping her, it should be Sarah. He's not really around, so I guess that's the best choice. I couldn't stand idly by and let Diana fight this thing alone. If I was somehow involved, then this became my fight as well. I focused my energy into my circlet and swung it violently at the copycat, causing a large chain to burst from it and clamp around the copycat's neck, with my holding my circlet like a handle. The copycat arced back and gripped the chain, clawing it as it choked. I continued to pull back to either continue choking it or to bring it away from Diana. My energy concentrated on the chain, making it stronger and tighten around the copycat. Diana! Diana quickly looked up and gripped her saber before pushing off at the ground and slicing through the copycat's stomach. I could only stare wide-eyed as the blade cut all the way through the copycat's body, perfectly dividing her in half. Oh gosh. What was even more frightening about it was that instead of blood, black ooze dripped from the slice. From the stench, it was ink, or somehow very similar in nature. Oh, we're going ink art here. Within seconds, the wound had vanished, making the copycat whole once more. Before it could attack, however, Diana carved through it again with her saber, painting the floor with a spray of its black ink blood as the slice ripped through its torso. Diana twisted her blade and continued to slice apart the copycat like scraping a hot knife through a butter. With each tear, the ink blood seemed to form it back together, but the copycat seemed to weaken each time. Soon it wasn't fast enough to completely heal the wounds on its body. It's becoming painted black. The copycat let out a growl, somehow still alive, and gripped Diana's neck. I could tell that it was immensely weakened, but continued to fight off. A shadowy aura bounced around it as a second voice, one I couldn't recognize, echoed behind Diana's.
You will not defeat me!
Oh gosh.
Yes, I will!
Diana quickly grasped onto the copycat's neck and began to crush it, making the copycat let go of her and take hold of Diana's wrists, hoping to stop her.
My name is Isaur, descendant of the Lilith bloodline and queen of the rebellion. I will no longer be bound by the power of your muse!
The power of your muse? Before I could even attempt to ponder what the hell she meant, Diana dug her nails into the copycat's neck, effectively stabbing through her skin and burying her nails in its throat.
You will not control me anymore!
With Diana's shout, her hand suddenly ignited its purple flame, catching onto the copycat's as Diana's fist tined further into its neck. With a bubbly cry, the copycat spasmed before igniting into a flesh pyre. Oh gosh. That's gonna follow me into my nightmares. The smoke that rose into the air faintly reminded me of a book burning. The smell of paper and ink becoming ashes and soot, as little by little the copycat started to burn away. Eventually, Diana's fingers finally revealed themselves as the ashes around her fingers fell to the ground and the remainder of what was the copycat. I felt myself step back and collapse onto the floor, taking everything in and trying to adjust myself. The entire situation became a wild ride, but one full of surprises and confessions. It was hard to place all together. I wasn't the only one to hit the floor. Diana fell to her knees, staring at her hands as the ashes of her copycat faded into the air like dust.
It's over.
I stared at Diana, seeing her gaze burn into her palm and watching it shake slightly. In her eyes, however, was a small glimmer that I could not recognize from her. It was almost innocent, kind, like she had been under a spell for many years and had finally been freed. Was this the true Diana? Diana gripped her fist and brought it to her forehead, inhaling deeply and stopping herself most likely from crying. Diana. I felt unsure of what to do as I watched her try and catch herself. I'm sure she had a lot to say, and while I very much deserved every explanation she could give, she had just done something that seemed both metaphorically freeing and heavy on her soul. I'm gonna wait.
I'll explain everything soon. Please, just...
I know. It's okay. I wasn't uncaring. I knew she needed some time to recuperate. I looked back to see her stare up at me, silent tears rolling down her cheeks as her expression gave away her surprise. Diana lowered her head and nodded, wiping her tears and taking deep breaths.
I know I shouldn't ask for this, but may I please tell you another time? It's late, and your fiancé will be looking for you.
I smiled and left the room, knowing that I would eventually know the truth. I trekked to my room, letting the day fade to the back of my memories as I remembered Diana's words to Damien. She would have a ritual set up for him if he wanted to be human, but the choice was his. A part of me screamed to stop him. The risk of his life wasn't worth it, but it was something he desired more than anything. The fix seemed simple, but it was deadly. I could lose a man I love over something trivial. But was it trivial?
Of course it is.
I wasn't surprised anymore, glaring at the floor as a voice made themselves known in my head.
He's being selfish. Why be a human when he could be happy with you as a demon? Why does this change have to happen?
It's what he wants.
But what do you want? You're the one about to sign your life away to him forever and ever. Shouldn't your opinion matter whether he becomes a human or stays a demon?
My mind began to agree, but wasn't that selfish within itself? Was I truly that important to where I was allowed to decide Damien's choices because I was his soon-to-be wife? I continued forward, letting the dark chuckle from the voice reverberate in my head like into a simple echo. This was my choice, and the voice needed to stay out of it. Whatever it was, I would deal with it in due time. For now, my focus was on Damien. He's finally wearing a shirt. I reached our room to see Damien standing by the door, obviously waiting for me. As he caught sight of me, he smiled slightly and walked over, meeting me halfway.
Hey.
Hey. I couldn't mask the worry in my voice. I was nervous, frightened beyond anything else about this. There was a lot at stake, and I became witness and potential victim to it, all with each minute that passed. But would Damien listen? Would he understand? What would he do if I voiced my worries? Would he give a damn about the risk? Did he give a damn? I gazed into his eyes, seeing a hopeful fire burn within them. His answers was clear, well, mine wasn't. It wasn't completely uncomfortable to be in my skin, but I had to accept that this was an obstacle we had to face one way or another. Damien took up my hand and held them to his chest.
Would you be upset with me if I went through with it?
No. Well, I don't... A part of me felt like screaming, begging for him to reconsider. The other part of me wanted to simply shake my head and accept that this was about to occur. I was completely torn. I gripped onto Damien's hands, clinging for something to soothe me, making me feel at ease. When nothing came, I scrambled to try and answer him. Oh, no. I don't want him to die. But it's what he wants. I mean, he doesn't want to die, he just wants to become human. No, I don't want to decide. I'm already gonna start crying. If it makes you happy, then do it. I had to accept it. It wasn't my choice to make at all. It wasn't fair to Damien to demand that he change his mind for me. Besides, I loved him no matter what. Human or demon, he was still a man I loved. I stared into Damien's eyes as I gripped his hands and hugged them to me lovingly. I could see the pure joy in Damien's eyes as he stared down at me, tears lacing at the edges. I love you no matter what you are. If you truly wish to be human, let's do everything we can to make that happen. Before I let Damien reply, however, I brought his hands to my lips, kissing over them with a now worried expression. I was still scared. I could lose him. But please, don't you dare die on me. I can't bear to live without you. Damien nodded and leaned in, kissing over my forehead gingerly.
I will do everything I can to survive it.
A wave of relief washed over me just from his words. Maybe he was enthralling me to calm me down, or maybe his love simply reassured me that everything would be alright. Either way, this was happening. I looked up at him and caressed his cheek, feeling him lovingly nuzzle into my palm. Then, let's tell Diana. A smile danced along Damien's lips before he wrapped his arms around me and buried his head in my shoulder. I could hear him whimper a bit in happiness as I wrapped my arms around him, pulling him close.
Thank you.
I could faintly hear the voice in my head scoff.
Wow, you're really going to let him die. How sad. I guess you'll have to prepare a funeral instead of a wedding.
I rolled my eyes and held Damien tighter. I wouldn't listen to it anymore. I believed in our love more than anything. We would be okay. The 2 days that followed came filled with work from Diana and her group. Upon Damien's request, Diana ordered a massive search for everything needed for a transmutation ritual that would normally have been used to make a human a demon. The worry of this ritual bubbled in my core, but I was going to be alright. This was something Damien and I decided together, and this was going to make Damien happy. That was all that mattered in the end. Of course, the experience wouldn't have been great even without the lovely voice in my head trying to convince me otherwise. I settled that the voice was some form of worry, some sort of regret I was holding that was morphed to represent Diana, the one who placed the worry there years ago. I would beat it out as soon as Damien returned to me as a human. As the 7th day arrived, the ritual was prepared and ready for us. The others gave us their concerns and wishes, hoping for the best regardless of what happened. We were positive that we would be okay. Entering the war room, Diana looked over at the pair of us, nodding and stepping away from the table. On it were arranged purple and gold candles, all lit with black, but somehow illuminating flames that flickered in the air gently. It seemed mystical and shadow-like, but if this was how it was done, then it was how it was done. There was a space in the center of the table for a body to lay down within the circle of candles, making it clear what had to happen. Diana gestured to the table, looking to Damien and pointing to the large space between the arranged candles.
Lie down when you're ready.
Damien nodded before turning to me and smiling, taking my hand and kissing it.
You'll be here when it's over, right?
I nodded, smiling up at him and kissing his hand in return. I will, I promise. I feel like I made the wrong choice. A smile was exchanged between us before Damien looked at Diana and walked to the table, stepping up on a block that was placed for him near the table to let him climb up with ease. As Damien settled onto the table, Diana walked over to me and took my hand, guiding me towards the table as well. Huh?
A theory. Indulge me.
I watched as Diana guided me to a chair beside the table, letting me sit on it before taking Damien's in my hands and clasping them together.
This is part of the ritual?
No, but it's a theory I have that might help.
The power of love? I hope so. Diana closed her eyes and wrapped her hands around Damien's and mine, letting a soft purple glow emanate from them and circle around our hands.
You are human and are full of energy. If something falters, we can use your energy to rekindle it and resume the ritual.
Fear sank into my core, remembering the risk of this transformation. But at least Diana was trying to find ways to make the ritual work. It was rather thoughtful. Damien smiled at me before lying head back and staring at the ceiling. I squeezed his hand as Diana removed her hands from our clasped ones. Purple magic continued to dance around our hands as I smiled back at Damien.
Ready?
Damien and I nodded at the same time before both of us closed our eyes. I could hear Diana step back and mutter under her breath some sort of Latin incantation I couldn't dissect. As she did, the energy around the room began to pulse and wave like an ocean in a storm. The air began to brush against my skin, causing me to look down at Damien, seeing the black fire around the candles around him intensify in their illumination. I tightened my hold on Damien's hand and shut my eyes again, desperate and hopeful. This had to work. It had to.
It won't work.
Shut up, boys! In the darkness of my mind, the voice appeared, making me grimace. Leave me alone.
I'm telling the truth. It won't work. He'll die and you'll be all alone. All because you wanted to make him...
Shut up! My mental shout made the voice silence itself. I had enough of its torment, its teasing and prodding. Nothing was going to go wrong. I glared into the dark, gritting my teeth. We're going to be fine. Damien will be human and will leave this world for good. I took in a breath and focused myself on remaining calm and hopeful. I know what you are.
Then say it. Make me believe it.
As I stared into the dark, I could feel a small smile grace my lips. It was clear who the voice was now. You're my worries, my doubt. You are my emotions intensified and transformed into some sort of haunting being in my head. Its silence became my confirmation. It had personified my worries and my doubts as they had become a voice in my head, trying to guide me towards the wrong choice. As I was magically inclined, it became an actual shadow that haunted me, my thoughts and dreams, feeding off of my fear and dread and becoming a part of me. I couldn't shake off easily, however, I know I could. With this transformation, I would finally destroy it. I was wrong to doubt Damien. I was wrong to doubt myself. That is what we need, and nothing is going to keep us from the goal we want to achieve. We will defeat the Demon Lord, go home, and live happily lives together, as humans. I wanted to be firm. I wanted to stand strong. As I finished speaking, however, this voice simply chuckled.
But if Damien becomes a human, he'll die at the Demon Lord's hands.
I gasped as memories of my nightmare flashed before my eyes. Damien was a human in the nightmare, dying by sacrificing himself for my sake. The simple realization shook my core, making me fearful once again. If Damien became human, I'd lose him anyway. My soul became heavy and racked with doubt.
There we are. You cannot win this little battle with me. Either way, you lose.
Think of Damien. I began to flood my thoughts with thoughts of Damien, our love in the human world. We were so happy and joyous together, forgetting the worries of the world and simply living with each other. There was no greater love story than the story I lived with him and would continue to love him with him until the end of time.
Karen!
No! No! Damien Diana's voice ripped me from my thoughts, gasping at the sight of as I became the witness upon Gasping at the sight of it, I became witness to upon opening my eyes. Damien's body had become engulfed in black flames from the candle, the fire wrapping around his body like a cocoon of chains. Damien!
Focus your energy and save him!
I slammed my free hand into the hand I was clasping tightly, uncaring that my flames were looking at me as well. I dug my hands into his hands, shutting my hands tightly. Don't leave me! Please! Oh God. No, I don't know. You know what? Take me instead. I wasn't going to let take him. If death was taking anyone, it would be me. The flames, as if they accepted my terms, quickly began to shake off of Damien's body and up his hands to me, wrapping me in their tight embrace and burning over my skin. Oh God.
No!
The flames began to encase us, blinding my nerves in endless pain and wrapping my mind in agony. In a last attempt to live, Damien sat up and wrapped his arms around me, clinging to me tightly.
I won't let you go!
I went through the pain between us and gripped Damien in return, the flames intensifying in our embrace. I won't let you go either! I was in tears, hoping deep within my heart that we would live. I loved him and he loved me. We needed to survive. In a burst of white light, Damien and I were suddenly pushed from each other. Ah! I don't know. The light became blinding. My body felt warm, but there was suddenly no pain. There was no fire around me, no damage done. I was just wrapped in a white light. Was I dead? My lungs still took in air, my heart was still beating, and my skin still felt as warm. I was alive. Then what happened? Slowly the light faded from the room, revealing the war room once again. I had fallen to the ground, aches rushing through my body as I looked around. What did we do? As my eyes locked into Damien, I gasped, seeing him floating in the air with a large black orb floating in front of his body. His eyes were lifeless, but his skin was still saturated with life. No! Oh wait, is that his... Damien? Diana's voice forced me to look over, gasping as she glared hard at Damien and held out her hand at the orb in front of him. The orb began to trickle an inky black energy that danced through the air and sailed towards Diana's hands, burning into her palm and fading into her skin. She winced as the veins within her purple-tainted skin began to glow a black color, snaking through her bloodstream through her hands. As the black energy left the orb began to lighten from a pure black to a silver to a finely white. This was happening. Damien was becoming human. As the orb finally developed a pure white color, the orb floated into Damien's body and made him gasp out for air, eyes finally brimming with life. I made the right choice. Damien! Damien fell forward, causing me to reach out and capture him in my arms. He instinctively wrapped his arms around me and toppled over, landing with me on the floor and him on top of me. Despite the pain in my body, I could feel Damien breathing, his heart beating, see his eyes as though they looked down at me in complete shock and disbelief. I felt surprise run through my own mind and emotions. We did it! We had done it! I lifted a weak arm and cupped Damien's cheek, seeing him take everything in. Damien, are you okay?
I
was sure he was lost on what to say. I was as well. I felt tears gather in my eyes as I wrapped my arms around him and hugged him tightly. You're alive. And human. I could feel it in my soul. He was human like me. He had gotten his wish and he was alive to see it. Damien began to shudder in my arms, agreeing with my statement and hugged me tightly, crying on my shoulder. No! I thanked every deity I knew, every star in the sky. It worked. It really worked. I looked over at Diana to see her form a large gem in her unaffected hand and slam it into her palm directly over the source of the black veins dancing up her arm. They slowly stopped their ascent up her arm and began to trickle down into the gem. The jewel that was once pure and clear like a cut diamond became black like an onyx. As the last of the black energy faded from Diana, she toppled over and gripped the gem to her chest, making sure not to land on it.
God damn it all.
I couldn't help but stop the happy laughter that erupted from me at the realization of it all. Everything was okay now. We were all right. Damien lifted his head up and slowly pulled me up to where we were both sitting up, wiping his eyes and smiling from ear to ear at me in pure happiness. I smiled and leaned in, kissing him his nose gently. We did it. Damien nodded and hugged me to him before looking over at Diana, seeing her look up at us with an unamused grimace.
You almost lost your lives. And you're smiling.
Damien and I looked at each other before Damien let out a breath and hugged me to his side.
Humans are always risking their lives. You wouldn't understand.
I laughed, as did Damien, while Diana rolled her eyes and slowly stood up, still gripping the gem in her hands. As we stood, Diana tossed the gem at Damien.
Huh? What is this?
Does that mean he can still use his powers without actually being a demon? Because that'd be awesome, and that way he won't die.
Your weapon against the Demon Lord. That gem holds all of your powers, and is slowly intensifying its power. Break it, and you'll be able to use your powers one last time at full potential.
Good. I stared wide-eyed at Diana. Where did this come from? Diana looked back at me and crossed her arms, raising an eyebrow.
You're not the only one who saw Damien's fate in a dream. I would rather not see another person die at the Demon Lord's hands, no matter who it is, and I'd rather not be blamed for it.
I was stunned. Diana had seen it too? She let out a sigh and began to walk towards the exit of the room, most likely drained from the experience.
We head out in the morning. I will brief everyone of the plan once we get to the Demon Lord's castle.
With that, Diana left us alone. Damien gripped to me and looked down at me, cradling the gem in his hand in amazement.
So, we're set.
I nodded happily. Yeah. Our private moment was interrupted by the rushing of the incubi and their wives into the room, most likely being let in by Diana after she left.
Everything good?
Damien and I looked at each other in shock before nodding to the group, hugging each other lovingly. Yep, just two humans cuddling. The group seemed to be excited at the news, gathering around us and visually checking us for any wounds or bruises. To my surprise as well, there were none, even after the attack from the Black Flames. Tanner really pulled through. Damien, now being crowded, pushed everyone back, pocketing the gem.
We're okay. We're okay.
We still need to check on you, Damien, to make sure.
I giggled and stepped away from Damien, kissing his cheek. I was exhausted and needed to get to bed before I passed out in Damien's arms. The whole ordeal. Let them check you out, Damien. I'll be in the room. Damien stared before nodding, understanding that I needed rest, before surrendering himself to the scanning eyes of his brothers. I took that moment to wave to the others and sneak out towards my room. As I left, I searched for Diana. Time had passed, and I knew that now was the moment to get my deserved answers. At least, I wasn't being followed, so I began to scour the castle, trying to find where Diana had gone off to. Thank you, Sayro. At the sound of Sayro clearing his throat, I quickly turned around and saw Sayro look to me as if was waiting for me to turn around and face him. As I did, he nodded his head and gestured to follow him. I did, following him into a new branch of the castle I had not been in before. I was stunned to see such a place, but as I walked on, the air seemed to grow fresher with each step. Eventually, I was led to a door. Sayro slowly opened it, and I could only stare at what I had been presented. Ooh! A large forest, obviously hidden and bound by magic, stretched as far as my eyes could see past the door. I'm just waiting. Okay. As I stepped out, I could feel that I was somehow in another void, some sort of protected place in the castle. I continued to walk in, taking in the sights around me. The trees were lush, and the air was as fresh as the countryside in the human world. Despite the feeling of magic around me, I could tell that this place was an untainted sanctuary. Soon enough, however, I stopped at the sight of Diana, kneeling by a large and beautiful pink and purple tree. She had her head bowed, as if she was praying, so I very slowly walked up beside her, wondering what she was doing. The song she was muttering was unfamiliar, but the sight of her hands made me silently gasp in surprise. A small silver crown, barely large enough to fit a newborn's head, rested in her hands as Diana stared down at it lovingly. The way she held it on her palms showed its significance, as if it could break at the smallest movement. After a moment, Diana lowered it to the base of the tree alongside two beautiful gold crowns that looked to be freshly polished and welded. As Diana pulled her hands away, she looked to me with a slight frown.
This was my punishment.
This? Diana nodded and turned her head back to the crowns.
Before I went to the human world, I was a simple princess. I studied every topic of knowledge known to the abyssal planes, and trained to one day become a strong and powerful queen. That was all thanks to my mother and father.
My eyes drifted to the two crowns, realizing the significance. Diana continued.
Months before I was supposed to be wed to James, my mother and father told me that I was going to have a baby sister. I couldn't have been any happier. Every descendant of Lilith is born a single child, but to have a sibling...
The small crown caught my attention as Diana let out a shaky sigh but kept speaking.
I vowed to protect her and my parents, knowing that the wedding would ensure our kingdom's safety. But when I arrived at the Demon Lord's castle, I was told that the wedding was cancelled, and the agreement that kept my kingdom safe was on the verge of dissolving, because my husband and his brothers had run off. My instinct was to run back home, protect my city and my family at all costs. But another urge struck me at the same time.
What do you mean? Diana looked up the tree leaves, causing me to do the same. On each branch was a plethora of purple fruits that resembled peaches. I was tempted to see so many hidden beneath the leaves of the tree, but Diana's answer caused me to look back at her attentively.
In the kingdom of heaven, there is a city called Yggdrasil. It runs like clockwork, and the spirits that live there are the ones who influence everything that happens in the human world. The weather, the environment, everything.
I stared wide-eyed at Diana. There was a city that was devoted to that? How the hell did that even work? Diana continued, trying to ease my confusion.
There are beings in that city called muses. Powerful beings who have a gift given to them by the ruler of heaven called suggestion. It gives them the ability to strongly encourage people to do something in their lives, whether it be bad or good.
Huh. So is that what the other Diana was?
One muse, however, is powerful enough to live outside of the city, and decided to make a very, very strong suggestion to me for the sake of her story.
I tried to take everything in. I expected an answer, but this seemed ridiculous. Muses, suggestion? How was this all possible? Demons were one thing, but having the ability to control people with suggestion? That was way too much of her power to even be real.
This muse needed a proper villain for her story. One who had everything to lose, but no way to try and protect what she had. A stubborn princess who was willing to kill for the sake of her kingdom.
Someone willing enough to kill a human. Diana nodded, silently swallowing her grief.
While my heart told me to return to my kingdom, my mind became obsessed with finding the boys and bringing them home. I begged the Demon Lord to let me find them and bring them back, and he agreed to hold off any invasion until I returned. I dissected the castle, looking through every nook and cranny, trying to find any hints to where they had gone. When I found the remnants of the gate spell your grandfather used to bring them to the human world, my mind suddenly latched on to getting through without a second thought.
Diana looked away from me, lowering her head in shame.
Without thinking it through, I recast the gate spell and used the remainder of that man's life to enter the human world. I didn't realize what I had done until the gate closed and he took his last breath.
You were there when he died?
I was. The gate spell was connected to him, so when I opened it back up, it sent me straight to him and allowed me to use his life energy.
I watched as Diana lifted her hands and stared into them, slightly shaking.
When I realized what I had done, I became racked with grief. I ran as far as I could from his body, changing myself into a human, and simply ran until I couldn't any longer. I had taken away the life of a human, something demons are not allowed to do unless it was to protect the secrets of magic. I feared the angels would hunt me down, but as I rested, I suddenly became filled with unjustified purpose and confidence. I repurposed my disguise to match how I really looked, and found myself on the hunt for the incubi.
All of this was because of a muse?
Muses are dangerous beings, dear. While they cannot completely control you, their suggestions are as powerful as your natural instincts. This muse didn't want her villain to wallow in grief, but to become the perfect enemy for her main character.
Me? Diana nodded once more.
A love story that would wreck the 5 worlds. A romance of a human and a demon prince. When the love of a human is said to be impossible to gain, could a simple human have the strength to obtain it with her heart?
It all made sense. Diana killed my grandfather, who granted me his mansion, where I met the incubi. All the pieces of my past were aligned with Diana being both a victim of circumstance, the inciting incident of my life, and the villain I had to go up against. I stared at my knees, feeling my mind jumble at piecing everything together. My life was written out by someone beyond my control. I started to question everything. Were any of the choices I made in my life my own? Sensing my fear, Diana placed a hand on my shoulder and felt her calm my anxiety. As I looked up at her, she gave me a sad smile.
Before you think that your life is a lie, know that a muse only has the ability to focus on one individual when making their suggestion. Every choice you made was of your own design, even the part when you told me off.
I looked deep in Diana's eyes, seeing her sincerity and wisdom of the words she spoke. I felt relieved that I was in control of my life, but to have a story laid out for me was something I wasn't prepared to completely take in. Maybe it was better to be ignorant. I shook my head and attempted to change the subject. That doesn't explain what that copycat was. Diana chuckled and moved to sit on her hip, looking to me with a hand over her lap.
Well, I am a very powerful succubus, as you well know. I couldn't just let a muse completely use me. So after I stole your energy that night, before I returned home, I forced the suggestion out of my soul, hoping to be rid of it forever. Unfortunately, when I returned and found my kingdom in flames, my grief resurrected it, and it became a permanent part of me, haunting me and reminding me of what I could have been. A ruthless, cruel temptress that could have killed another human to get her way. It forced me to believe that everything was my fault, and in a way, it was. I wasn't strong enough to stop the suggestion from taking over. It became the source of my madness, controllable at first, but fueled by each fight I fought with the Demon Lord.
It made sense. If Diana herself had madness, then fighting the Demon Lord made it worse. That's why it became powerful enough to become its own being. What if it consumed her? I shivered at the idea of the cruel Diana returning, making Diana giggle a bit.
Don't worry, dear. That copycat is no longer here. I don't think I can ever revert back to who I was. But I promise that the woman who destroyed your grandfather's life is gone.
Well, what are you going to do now? After another soft chuckle, Diana looked at the magic sky beyond the tree line.
I think I'll save this world and help it grow for as long as I can. It's what my family would have wanted.
What about what you want? Diana's happiness was important as well. Now that she was free of her guilt and obligation, she could choose her life. Diana looked at her feet and shook her head.
What I want does not matter. It never has. What is important is this world and its safety.
For once, I was able to understand what the copycat meant by her having a golden heart. I felt a little envious and a little pity for her. Hopefully she would be truly happy just helping the demon world without expecting anything in return. I left her by the tree to prepare for the morning. We needed to rest, and Diana wanted to be alone with her family one last time before the siege.
Hey.
Huh? What is it?
Keep everything that happened between us. I'm asking sincerely.
With a nod, I smiled and made a silent promise to keep quiet. With that, I returned to my room. Ah, man. Was that something, huh? And we're like probably at 1 hour and 4 minutes. Yeah. I think we should probably end it there. I think we're almost gonna finish this. I should probably save though. No! I went back. Oh wait, no. Well, I guess I'll read the next 2 lines. The more I thought about it, the more surreal the feeling became. I was going to be in a room, meeting a powerful adversary face to face, and set myself free of the curse he brought it down upon me. As Damien entered the room at last, I smiled and stood, walking over and wrapping my arms around him as he returned my embrace.
Tonight is our last night here.
Yeah. We held each other, locked in silence, and unable to say anything more. We had been in a heavy predicament, and we worked through it. It was something we did together. All we could do in the moment was hold each other and listen to our synchronized heartbeats. At the thought of tomorrow danced in my head, I began to fear even more. Was I ready to go into battle? Was Damien? Were any of us, for that matter? We were about to walk into the final battle of a world war. Would we survive? Would I live to see Damien afterward and feel his embrace again? Tomorrow brought too many questions to think about, and I became frustrated and scared. And this is where we'll end it off. Anyways, that was so, so much. I'm really liking the story so far. It's so good. I mean, me being a writer, I could kind of see more how it was gonna go, but not exactly. But aside from that, yeah. I think the next part is probably going to be the last part of Damien, and then I guess I'll probably go on to James like I did before. I think it was Damien, James, Sam, Eric. Oh wait, I forgot Matthew. Oh, and Matthew was last. And then it was Diana. Actually, I'll overlook. I'm gonna go look over the other videos to see what path. I'm pretty sure I did do James second, I think. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.